Miss X, 1982, from Romulus, Alabama. Miss X was discovered on April 18th in Romulus, Alabama. There is another case of the same name recently identified as Patra Patmos, but this took place in 1967 in Delaware, so this is not that case. This yet-to-be-identified doe was found on an Alabama riverbank in 1982. When they examined her, they determined suffocation was the COD. But who did this isn't known any more than who she was. There is a post-mortem photograph available online, and she's described as recognizable. She was around 115 pounds and 5 foot 4 inches tall. Whoever took her life also subjected her to SA, and it's possible she had been physically assaulted also, and it appears it took place in the same place she was found. Any abbreviations I use in this video are because of the rules of YouTube, so if I've abbreviated something, you can find it in the description below as to what it is. I apologize for having to do this. She had what was described as a ruddy complexion, meaning she'd spent a lot of time outdoors, either because she was unhoused or just because she enjoyed outdoor activities. It could be either of those or both. She had an upper partial denture and dark brown shoulder-length hair. They believe she may have had brown eyes. Her family might remember she had a visible scar that could be seen under her right eyebrow. They think she may have had a child in the past, so there might be a child out there seeking information on what happened to their mother. She was wearing a preppy brand blue shirt, knitted blue pants, and tennis shoes. The missing cases of Cindy Allegro, Teresa Baxter, Andy Coyle, and Sandra Maddox have been ruled out as being this decedent. Miss X has gone unidentified for 41 years. Cheryl or Sherry, Nashville, Tennessee. A man was fishing in March of 1976. He discovered a woman in the Harpeth River, and this is in Nashville, Tennessee. It was believed she'd been there less than a day. She had a photo in her pants, and he was a white blonde-haired boy with the name Little Charlie written on the back. And then there was a phone number. This seemed like it would be much easier to solve than reality would prove it to be. They called the number, and there was a Charlie at that number. This would lead to Charles Moore from East Nashville. It seems pretty cut and dried. It was a great lead, but it didn't pan out. It turns out there were 2 Charlies at that number. Charlie Moore was 24, and his father was known as Big Charlie. Neither one of them had any relation to the child in the photo at all, but she did meet the younger Charles at that number. Charles would explain he met the young woman when he and his brother-in-law picked her up hitchhiking on Interstate 24. She was with another teenage female who he would describe as slender, white, with sandy blonde hair, scars on her wrists, and she was wearing wire-rimmed glasses that had round lenses. He believes that the woman in question had the name of either Cheryl or Sherry. He would go on to say that they were traveling from a treatment facility in Minnesota, or at least that's what they told him. They would say that they escaped their stay there, near the Twin Cities, and had taken off. And when he gave her the ride, it was about a week before she was found. So a week had passed in between. And the weirder thing is, they had said they were heading to Haines City, Florida. However, when they were found, they were going the opposite way on the highway. What seems so crazy about this is you would think there would have been some sort of alert if you had teenagers escaping a facility. It could be that they did escape from one and it wasn't near the Twin Cities. They were on the highway, so they could have been coming from anywhere. They would share that the woman that would become Jane Doe, she was sent there for issues with alcohol. The other woman would say that she was there because she wanted to take her own life. But that woman never spoke out at all after this other gal was found. It's possible something happened to her also. The reason that she had the phone number belonging to Charles was explained by him. He would say that he thinks that the photo might have belonged to her companion. When they were looking for paper in the truck, she ended up using that as a substitute. Then he went ahead and gave her his phone number. He would say that he dropped her and her friend off about 90 miles the other direction of where she was found. As I mentioned before, it makes no sense that they were going in a different direction, at least not on purpose, although who knows, maybe their plans had changed. Charlie Moore and his brother were excluded as persons of interest. The police don't believe they had anything to do with this. It was noted in the examination that her pants were unbuttoned and she was not wearing a top, and there were cuts and bruises visible. Her COD was drowning. She'd been active in an adult way that I can't mention on here. I'd say SA, but we don't know if there was consent or not. They recorded her dental information, and that is available, as are fingerprints. But despite this and looking and ruling out some people that came along as suggestions, none of this led to her identity, and for some reason they have not taken her DNA yet, or at least it says online that it's not available. It's pretty unusual that a case of this age isn't in CODIS yet, but it appears it's not. It says she was buried and then later moved to a different site, but no reason is listed for no DNA. It's possible they don't know where her remains are. It happens a lot, unfortunately. The sad thing, too, is if these are the only modes of identification that they have or are possible, the odds of finding dental films at an existing dental place might be minimal. Now, of course, we take exams like that and they take digital films, but back then it was a hard copy, and the older you get, the bigger and bulkier, of course, the items are, and it takes more storage room. I can't say her specific age on here, as they always seem to shut off my comments. It's meant to prevent bullying, which obviously this is not that. But anyway, you can see the age on the screen. This would mean someone in her family is missing someone likely born from 1959 to 1962. It's believed she is either Hispanic or Native American. She was 5'2" and around 120 to 130 pounds. She had brown hair and brown eyes. She also had had a lot of dental work done, mostly fillings. She had burns on her arms that were possibly from cigarettes. She was also noted to be well endowed, though it doesn't name the size of her bra, just that it was large for her age. She was wearing a rawhide bracelet as well as a choker-type necklace, although of course these were found nearby her remains, so there's no way to know for sure that they belonged to her. They do say that she had a mole near her left eye and she had a larger build. She had several surgical scars, although they don't indicate what they were likely for. They describe her upper left canine as being oddly positioned. She had a lot of fillings, but there was a large amount of decay in one tooth there and no filling, which perhaps means that whatever was going on in her life, she wasn't getting the care she should have at the time. If anyone knows anything at all about this case, please call the number on the screen. It's possible without the DNA, this is the only way it's going to get solved. Those who grew up with her and might be her peers who would know somebody was missing, they would likely be in their early to mid-60s now. Cheryl Sherry Doe has gone unidentified for 46 years. The Tribeca Jane Doe, 2008, Manhattan, New York. This case is extra sad in a world of sad cases. A woman was found on March 31st, 2008, in New York City, and it was a bit of a miracle she was found at all. She clearly wasn't supposed to be. She was found underneath a concrete floor that was laid in the basement of a Manhattan nightclub. So this means many people probably had access to the scene, and then of course whoever was doing the work. It doesn't say why they were pulling the concrete up, but the floor that was removed had been there for decades. I get a lot of negative comments about my math. It always drives me nuts, and I feel like I have to address them if I see them. And I definitely have made mistakes before involving math. Math is not really my strong suit. But also in these cases, the postmortem interval matters. So if I estimated it based on now and she was there for 20 years, it would be wrong. In this case, it's estimated she'd been there 20 to 24 years. So that means the concrete was probably put down in 1984 to 1988, which would likely be when she passed. Another assumption I have to make too, because I don't know for sure, is whether or not she passed at the time they did the concrete or it was even before that. She was a black female who was around 5'4". With her were pennies that were dated 1983 and 1984, which obviously means that 1984 is the earliest she could have been placed there. And this may in part be how they determined the postmortem interval. She had with her a lighter, some lipstick, and a square makeup bag or purse. She had heart-shaped earrings that were wrapped in a bubblegum wrapper. Because she had the lighter, it's possible she was a cigarette smoker. So her family would be looking for someone who went missing around 1984 to 1988. They believe she was 25 to 35, so her date of birth would be between 1949 and 1963. And of course, those dates, just like height and eye color, it can vary. So it's important not to take those estimates as concrete fact. The New York Jane Doe 2008 has gone unidentified for 14 years, but her family has likely been missing her for 34 to 38 years. The Clark County John Doe 2002 from Clark County, Nevada. I have to start out with a huge thanks to Blondie. I always try to take the time to print a thank you to anyone who suggests a case that I should cover. But in this case, she suggested a number of extra things to me, and I want to address them quickly. She's been taking the time to email those in charge of the case, and she did get a response back from one of them. What I thought was really cool about this is she's not an American, and not that we don't care about people in other countries, but she comes from a country that English isn't her native language. And despite the fact she's not a native speaker, she's emailing questions in English to all these different coroners in several cases. It's really powerful to me that it doesn't matter where someone's from, that they've picked a case that they care about elsewhere. I don't know, the world's been so nasty lately. It's kind of cool to see people relate on a human-to-human level. And the other thing is the cases that she suggested. Maybe all of us could do that. Find a few specific cases that you care about and just keep tracking them and do what you can getting the word out on social media. And if you email the coroner and they don't respond, they really don't most of the time. But it can't hurt, and all of these cases deserve somebody championing them. In this case, a man was found just off the interstate on July 28, 2002. Thankfully, a passing motorist saw him and called the authorities. The case is strange in a few ways. There wasn't a whole lot of info, but what there is creates questions. It doesn't answer them. For instance, the COD in this case isn't listed, but it says accidental. I don't know if that means an actual accident or maybe dehydration. For a while there, my husband had a convention that was always happening in Las Vegas every summer in July. As anyone else who's been there in July can attest, it gets really hot. So I'm sure a health problem could happen. I remember the temperature one time just because they weren't sure they were going to be able to fly out, and it was 119 degrees. That would be 50 degrees Celsius. You could actually feel the weight of the air outside. It just always makes me wonder exactly what happened when they're not specific, or maybe they don't even know. Maybe they're guessing. The description in this case is terrible. He's listed as being 30 to 60, which would place his date of birth as 1942 to 1972. He had reddish brown hair, and he was around 5'10" and 150 pounds. They say his eye color is hazel, but take that with a grain of salt. Eye color can change after someone passes, and it often appears differently. And in this case, he's described as becoming mummified, although only 2 days had passed. They didn't take photos of his tattoo, which is unfortunate, but it's actually pretty common. We do know he had a tattoo of a broken heart with a knife on his right shoulder. That tattoo could be the best clue of anything that's listed. He had Levi's 550s on, and they were a relaxed fit, and it's listed as a size 12, which I'm wondering might be a mistake. I don't know. I've never seen men's clothing listed that way. According to Google, this would correlate to about a 31 by 32. He had on a black Bugle Boy t-shirt with pink, orange, and green on it. He was wearing a size 8 Cherokee brand hiking boots. Blondie contacted the coroner and was able to confirm that there's no recreations other than the sketches that are on there in this case. She also pointed out that to her it didn't read like he was a drifter based on his clothing. And while he was on the highway and could have been hitchhiking, there are other reasons he could be there. So it's really hard to say if he's from Nevada or from elsewhere. Of course, Las Vegas is a tourist town, and there are people from all over the world there all of the time. There is an interesting thing about his teeth. It says dental age 50 plus. And at least according to Google research with, take that as what it's worth. But it appears that dental age can be used to estimate chronological age. So if Google is telling the truth, that would mean his family is missing someone born perhaps more like 1942 to 1952. If anyone has any idea who this man was, please call the number on the screen. The Clark County John Doe, 2002, has gone unidentified for 20 years. The San Francisco Jane Doe, 2003, San Francisco, California. This is the other case that Blondie suggested. She attempted to get them to confirm or not if there will be a new and perhaps better recreation done, and to confirm whether or not they had DNA on file. There was no response, however, and I just want to reiterate again that I think it is so cool pushing on specific cases. As annoying as it is if the coroner or whoever doesn't reply, and most often they won't, I just want to reiterate what a good idea it is to push on these cases. Maybe it will serve as a reminder that they are even out there. Even if someone doesn't respond, it might be a good reminder and it might push the case. Who knows? In this case, a woman was found in the San Francisco Bay beneath the Golden Gate Bridge on November 9, 2003. It appeared she'd had a manicure and perhaps a pedicure, and her toenails were polished. It appears she was around 5 foot 9 inches tall and wearing gray New Balance athletic shoes. She had brown hair, and she was most likely around 40 to 50. This means her family is missing a loved one born around 1953 to 1963. She's described as being of medium to heavy body type. She was wearing a blue Cardinal plastic watch. Her pants were To-Go brand, and they were in a size 14. They believe she weighed around 190 pounds. The San Francisco Jane Doe has gone unidentified for 19 years. The Bartow John Doe, 2018, Cartersville, Georgia. I have to acknowledge the GBI forensic artist Kelly Lawson. Her recreations on the does in Georgia are amazing. They're stunning in a way you wouldn't say that normally about a recreation. It's the only time I've ever seen a recreation that would be suitable for framing, but that's how good hers are. Something that would be amazing in any other situation to put on your wall. They always have such a respectful theme to them, and the colors, it's all, I don't know. I just think she does an amazing job. On September 1st, 2018, in Cartersville, Georgia, a man was found, although they couldn't closely pinpoint his age. They list it as 40 to 80, but that's really wide. They know he was about 5'10" and 230 pounds. He was the victim of a GS to his head, and he had been weighted down and placed in Lake Altoona near Cartersville. Whoever did this put the backpack on him with rocks and sand, as well as a pair of ankle weights and an anchor that had been fastened to a back brace. Additionally, red ropes were used to bind him. It's unclear where he went into the water. It wasn't very deep where he was found, maybe around 6 feet, which was near a bridge. They did the best they could to recreate what he might have looked like. Although 40 to 80 is, of course, super wide, it would mean the family missing him would be missing someone born 1938 to 1978. He also had a compass around his neck, and that was attached with yellow string. He had gray hair and no tattoos. The case has been held up because he didn't match any missing people from the Atlanta area. If you have any idea who he might have been, please call the number on the screen. The Bartow John Doe has gone unidentified for 4 years. The New York Jane Doe, November 1998, New York City, New York. On a Monday afternoon, on November 9th, 1998, a young woman who was in her mid-20s to mid-30s was seen standing on the train platform in New York City, New York. Those witnessing this would tell the police that she jumped in front of the northbound E train at 14th and 8th Avenue. She was still breathing and there appeared to be hope, but she passed on the way to St. Vincent's Hospital. They would state that she was white and she was believed to be 23 to 33, which would put her date of birth at 1965 to 1975. She was small, only around 5 feet and 105 pounds. She had thick brown hair that was around 10 inches long at the time. They also noted that her eyes were brown. She was wearing a tan flannel shirt, blue jeans, and she was carrying a black and blue backpack, as well as a bag that is described as multicolored. I was unable to find photos of any of these items. The missing women listed on the screen now have had their DNA compared to her. So these were all cases that were suggested to them by either the community or other jurisdictions. or were found on NamUs. They do note that they have her DNA on file, so family members missing her, or possibly those like her, can submit their DNA to NamUs. They usually ask for 2 family members if possible. The way to do this is in the description below. I hammer a lot on how the U.S. prioritizes mental health or doesn't, but there are still options out there. If you feel hopeless, there's no shame in reaching out. The number on the screen right now can be called. There is a phone number on the screen, but they can be reached by simply dialing 988. I encourage people to put this into their phone if there's any chance they think they might need it or someone in their family might need it. There's a network of over 200 centers now serving this 988 number. The New York Jane Doe, 1998, has gone unidentified for 24 years. The New York Jane Doe, 2000, New York City, New York. On May 6, 2000, a woman was recovered from the East River along 57th Street in New York City. The exact spot is shown here on the screen now. She'd been there a long time, perhaps half of a year even, to a full year. So for obvious reasons, what she looked like was a bit of a mystery. She was wearing a beige-colored t-shirt with red trim and a skunk emblem that can be seen here, with a rock band's name, Perfect Thyroid, written on the back. Additionally, she had on a dark blue Champion sports bra and blue paisley patterned boxer shorts. She was wearing olive green colored cargo pants from the brand name UFO. The concert shirt that she had on was considered a lead, and it was put out by Skunk Jam's production. Some of the shows they put on did include Perfect Thyroid. It was this and other ska bands that were playing in Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey areas. It's unclear where she got her shirt at, but of course it was most likely New York City, as that's where she was found. The guess on her hair color is that just a guess. She had no hair found at all, and so it's noted that it's possible she didn't have any prior to going into the water. They believe she was either white, Hispanic, or Native American, saying that she's around 5 foot 6 inches tall. She was likely born around 1982 to 1988, and her possible age can be seen here on the screen. She likely weighed around 140 to 150 pounds. The New York Jane Doe 2000 has gone unidentified for 22 years. The Grady County John Doe, 1983, Cairo, Georgia. It was on July 15th of 1983 that a man was found about 10 miles south of Cairo, Georgia. It's believed that he was a white man around 40 to 45 and around 5'11". They know that he had curly gray hair and he weighed around 160 pounds. He was wearing a white V-neck t-shirt, blue shorts with red trim, and slip-on shoes that had what's described as a basket weave on them. He also had on a gold wristwatch. He had full upper dentures, which is pretty common for the time, and a mustache. It was also noted that he smoked Camel cigarettes. While his exact COD hasn't been provided, they have said that someone took his life. Unfortunately, the name of he or who did this to him has never been discovered. Hopefully finding his name will help narrow down a suspect. If he was 40 to 45 at the time, that would mean he was born around 1938 to 1943. In all of these cases, the families deserve to know what happened to the person they love. If you have any idea who he might be, please call the number at the end. I try to give anonymous numbers usually, but if I can't find one, there still might be one out there. In this case, there was a tip line, and it's linked to in the description of this video. The Grady County John Doe, 1983, has gone unidentified for 35 years. The Onslow County Jane Doe, 1991, Hubert, North Carolina. Some hunters were out and about, and they were looking for raccoons in a wooded area near Bear Creek Road, where it intersects with Stewart Point Road in Hubert, North Carolina. They were out searching for raccoons in the woods when they found a skull on November 2nd, 1991. They would contact authorities who located most of the rest of her remains around 40 yards away from the initial location. They assessed the clothing she'd been wearing and concluded that she most likely passed in the fall of 1989 or the winter of 1990. Because this area was so isolated, they concluded that it was most likely the result of foul play. However, they were unable to determine exactly what had happened to her. Whatever it was, it didn't leave a mark on her skeleton. Because of this, they hit a brick wall and they would close the case, which I actually don't understand. And if anyone's familiar with police procedures, if you could leave a comment below, I'm really curious. I don't know why they would close a case that is still unsolved. It might be, I suppose, so it statistically looks better for cases not to be opened, but I'm curious if there's any other reason. In this case, it's noted that it was reopened in 2020 and a new reconstruction was done, stating they believe the new reconstruction is the most accurate. It's noted that they are currently doing further tests to determine eye color and hair color. The Parabon snapshots that they do are really interesting. I'm not sure how accurate, like say the eye color is. I think it's probably the same sort of predictions and statistics that are used by like 23andMe, although probably more accurate. But I know like my 23andMe says that I should have blue eyes and I don't. It's believed that in this case, our Jane Doe was around 5'1" to 5'2", tall, white, and with what is described as a slight build. She was likely around 20 to 30 years old. They believe she had been where she was found from around 1 to 3 years. So before I get comments about my math, I just want to explain that in this case, the post-mortem interval is factored in. This would place her date of birth as around 1958 to 1970. She had a degenerative bone disease in her neck and possible back problems. She was wearing a heavy crew neck sweater that was either gray or brown, which was sewn with gold thread. She had on black or blue stretch pants as well as white slip-on shoes with a small bow on them. One problem with her recreation is that her mandible was never recovered, so they don't really know what her jawline would truly look like, which I'm sure is the reason for the one that originally looked like a very odd recreation. So the non-pixelated recreations are just an estimate. Without the mandible, they don't actually know. She'd had some dental pain recently too, in the upper teeth that were found, possibly more in the bottom teeth, as her upper right wisdom tooth had erupted, and the upper left wisdom tooth had been removed prior to her passing. She had what was described as an unhealed socket, so I assume this means that the wisdom tooth was removed more recently. If anyone has any idea what happened to her, please call the number on your screen. The Onslow County Jane Doe has gone unidentified for 31 years. The Polk County Jane Doe, also known as Andrea Doe, Cedartown, Georgia. This is one of the rare cases where we know who did it, and we know why, but not who she was. I suspect that when I tell this story, it might not elicit a whole lot of sympathy, so if I could just start out by mentioning this girl was just 18 or 19. She had her whole life ahead of her, and you never know who might have changed paths. Most of us have a chance to change it around and make different choices. She didn't get that chance. There was an explosion in a residence in September of 2003. This is when our young Jane Doe was found. She was the victim of a GS and her hands were duct taped behind her back. She wasn't alone, and there were 2 males with her in the home when it detonated in Cedartown, Georgia. Before we dig into what she looked like and who her family is missing, I'm just going to tell you what came out at the trial in 2008. There were 5 defendants in this case, the names of which are shown on the screen right now. A young woman named Amanda testified she found our Jane Doe and the 2 other men at the scene, and it's haunted her ever since. Although she's a cooperating witness, she was involved also in what happened. She testified that she suffers panic attacks and nightmares as a result, and there was actually also a 4th victim. He was named Arturo Torres Ventura. He survived a GS wound to his head and burns 75% of his body, but he never regained consciousness. Amanda testified that she routinely went with her co-defendant, Daniel Villanes Reyes, to the house that it all went down in. The place was known as a brothel, and the people running it would purchase large quantities of contraband starting with an M that I'm not allowed to mention on YouTube. And then they would resell it to their own customers. However, contraband in question was a bad batch. And when I say M, I'm not talking about the one that is legal in some states. It's the one that does the most damage that can never be legal. Apparently, people they sold it to were complaining that they couldn't use it. So there was a dispute over money and paying. At one point, the young woman we now know as Andrea would throw a handful of powder into Daniel's face. That set off the chain of events that led to 4 people losing their lives and a young woman going decades without a name. Daniel pulled out a garbage bag, put it over her head, and used a weapon that starts with a G. It didn't stop there, however, and Daniel would insist that the woman testifying now, Amanda, that she take flammable liquid and splash it throughout the house, setting Andrea Doe and the other 2 men on fire. The trial involving this ended with the 5 defendants being convicted of a multitude of charges, stemming from their illegal exploits to how they took the lives of 5 people. It was those in the house and a few others that owed them money also. Included in this number is 2 people who were explained as being in the wrong place at the wrong time, though it doesn't specifically say what those circumstances are. In the end, indictments included 30 defendants from one gang, including charges of racketeering. But none of this helps with who the young woman was. No matter how it happened, she's someone's child. Andrea Doe was likely born 1983 to 1988, meaning she was mid-teens to 20 years old. She was of a small build, around 5'1" or 5'2", and around 100 pounds. She had straight, short black hair. She was wearing yellow metal earrings. There are no DNA or fingerprints, and while it doesn't specifically say why, I imagine the fire might be that reason, and maybe they won't ever be able to get DNA. That makes it just that much more important that someone come forward. While they think that her name was Andrea, they don't even know that for sure. Andrea Doe has gone unidentified for 19 years. Helen Doe, Kalama, Washington. On May 14, 1991, there was a tractor-trailer collision on I-5 in Cowlitz County, Washington. The driver was headed to Portland after dropping off the contents of his truck as scheduled. It was then that his truck rear-ended another vehicle, pulling out onto Interstate 5 near Kalama. As a result, the passenger and the driver perished. They were able to trace the fuel receipts of the driver from Missouri on May 7, 1991, forward through Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, and Oregon, before arriving in Washington on the day of the accident. The trucker was, of course, identified, and those who knew him said he was in the habit of picking up hitchhikers. But if he picked her up, no one knows where he picked her up from. She was described as being an indigenous woman who was 20 to 29 and around 5 foot to 5'4", and around 110 to 130 pounds. She had brown hair and her eye color was unknown. She had high cheekbones and severe scoliosis. Her curvature was severe enough, curving to the right, that it was outwardly obvious. She had on what was described as a black cowboy vest and a gray top that may have had pink in it. Cases like this are hard because, let's say she was picked up in Utah. She's out hitchhiking anyway, so that doesn't mean she's from Utah. So she honestly could be from anywhere. Her family would be looking for a missing person born around the years 1962 to 1971. That would mean her peers would be around mid to late 50s and early 60s. They exhumed her in 2014 to obtain DNA and do the reconstruction as to what she might look like. They successfully obtained DNA, but the kind they obtained in 2014 is for comparing 2 different sets of DNA. It's not the type used for genetic genealogy today. So if you're missing someone, it's really important to submit your DNA to NamUs. How to do that is explained in the description below this video. Helen Doe has gone unidentified for 31 years. The Hillsborough Jane Doe, 1990. Hillsborough, North Carolina. It was September 19, 1990, when a woman was found along the eastbound lanes of Interstate 40 in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Thankfully, a cleanup crew was working alongside the interstate as she was located 15 feet down an embankment and on the other side of a guardrail. As a result, she couldn't have been spotted from the road, which was probably the point. This was in the area east of the New Hope Church exit. Some people would call in to say that they saw her walking along I-85 near North Carolina Highway 62, near the Ramada Inn. There were also reports that she might have been seen at a truck stop in Alamance County. It was determined she was around 5'3" to 5'5" and around 110 pounds. They don't know if her hair was naturally blonde or if it was chemically done, which is probably why you see various colors of hair in the recreations and what she might look like. I see one reference that suggests it was dyed strawberry blonde, and others say it was frosted. And frosted is basically bleaching where it's pulled through a cap with a crochet hook. I know for me, my hair is pretty dark brown, and I had almost white blonde hair in some areas. And especially if someone had it bleached more than once, it got lighter and lighter because they couldn't control which parts of your hair was being pulled out. So if someone's missing her, she might look different here than she was when they last saw them. But this kind of goes for all of the unnamed does. Some things can change, or they might gauge wrong as to what color something was. So even if something doesn't match with a missing person report, doesn't necessarily mean it absolutely couldn't be that person. She was either mid-teens to her mid-20s, and she had a 3-inch surgical scar on her lower abdomen, which appears to be an appendix scar. She had good dental health, and 3 of her teeth had fillings. She was wearing an oversized pink sweatshirt seen here, with 3 cartoon bunnies shown on the front. The police tried to track down where the shirt originated from, but they couldn't come up with a place. They did a talk screen on her remains, and it was clean. It is noted that she had a thin, yellow metal ring on her left hand ring finger, as well as the bracelet seen here. Her COD was manual asphyxiation. Weirdly, she had clean socks and no shoes. Because she clearly hadn't been walking around in those socks, it's thought that maybe the person took her shoes as a souvenir. Family and friends would be looking for someone likely born from 1965 to 1976. Her peers would be around 47 to 58 years old in 2023, missing someone who disappeared from their lives in 1990 or earlier. A really disturbing element to this case is that it states she was cremated and buried at sea. Well, obviously no one had been identified using genetic DNA yet and genealogy. They knew DNA existed, so this just makes it that much harder now to solve. I'm not sure I understand cremating someone who hasn't been identified yet. But then again, they also lose where some of these people are too. So DNA isn't always a given. There are 2 components to a case like this, obviously. 1, who she was, and 2, who did it. In this case, the police noted there was possibly a link between other cases where the perpetrator was a man who drove a taxi. That man was arrested in Guilford County a few months later in 1990 after taking the lives of people in a similar way in that general location. Shortly after, police officers tried to interview him, which he refused to allow. He took his own life. So there's no way to know for sure if he is the perpetrator in this case. If they found DNA of the person who did this, that's not noted either. They've compared her DNA or dental films to 47 missing women, so far ruling out all of them. It isn't specifically stated, but I suspect that because she was cremated, that someone is going to need to come forward for a comparison. Her DNA is sitting in CODIS right now, and if anyone's missing a loved one, they should contact NamUs, which is in charge of these cases, and submit your DNA. There are laws in place that have to do with this. If anyone has any idea what happened to her, please call the number on your screen. The New York Jane Doe, 2018, Manhattan, New York. A woman was discovered in a wooded area near a bike path in Riverside Park on February 1st, 2018. This is located in the Manhattan area of New York on the water on the Upper West Side. She was wearing a dark gray tank top in a size 2XL, a sports bra, a black hooded sweatshirt, and capri yoga pants in size 12. Her Skechers shoes were 8.5. She also had a scrunchie, iPhone headphones, and a fanny pack. It appears she's either white, Hispanic, or of mixed heritage. She was between 5 foot and 5'4". They believe she was 40 to 65. This would mean she was likely born around 1953 to 1978. She had brown, wavy, curly hair. It's not clear how long she'd been where she was found, but they believe it was only months. She was, however, skeletal when they found her. Her COD hasn't been released, if it's even known. The New York Jane Doe 2018 has gone unidentified for 5 years. The New York City Jane Doe, August 2021. New York City, New York. The video seen here is of our Jane Doe walking toward the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. They list her as being 30 to 50, but it appears she's likely on the younger side of this. There are photos available online for anyone who might know her. I don't show postmortem photos on the channel here because it feels like it's disrespectful to them and to the people that don't expect to see that. In this case, our Doe sadly chose to jump. She was a black woman, around 5'1", and she weighed 117 pounds. Witnesses would say the woman jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge minutes after she was seen walking along it. As you can see here, she had several piercings. The first was in her eyebrow, and the second was in her lip. However, the piercing below her lip, she hadn't been wearing jewelry in it. It looks like she hadn't had the jewelry in her lip ring for a while. She had a tattoo on her left upper arm that said either RJK or ARIK. On the back of her left hand was KYRON, which had hearts by it. There was a tattoo of a leaf, possibly a hemp leaf, at the top of her left foot. Pictures of some of her tattoos are also available on NamUs. I normally try to show those photos on here, but in this case, I can't remove the background and make it less morbid because the ink is faded. But if you want to see the tattoos and you think you might recognize them, go to the NamUs page. The link to that profile is provided in the description below. The New York Jane Doe, August 2021, has gone unidentified for 1.5 years. The Randolph County Jane Doe, Randolph County, North Carolina. In this case, her skull was found in a creek bed near a railroad track embankment in Randolph County, North Carolina in 1997. No other remains were found. It doesn't help either that this is one of the worst creations that I probably posted on here. Hopefully a new one will be done with newer technology at some point. They believe she was a black female from 30 to 49, and she had numerous untreated cavities, and her gums were mildly receded, which can just happen with age, isn't necessarily based on dental health or her situation at the time. Although, of course, it's possible that she was homeless and wasn't able to receive dental care. Based on the assumption that she passed the same year she was found, which was May of 1997, she would have been born 1948 to 1967. But of course, had she been there longer and they're wrong, it would shift downward from those years. She does have DNA located in CODIS, so if someone possibly related to her sees this, you can upload your own DNA to that database. The Randolph County Jane Doe has gone unidentified for 25 years. Jane Doe B-17, King County, Washington. On January 2, 1986, skeletal remains of an unidentified female were found near Mountain View Cemetery in Auburn, Washington. Upon examination, they would determine she was likely white and around 5'8". The drawings are the initial recreations that were done at the time. Upon their examination, they determined she had likely been where she was found 1 to 3 years, and she was likely mid to late teens, which would place her date of birth likely 1965 to 1971. Because of the time involved, they didn't really know exactly what color her hair or eyes were. There's a well-known element to this case, and I'll get to it in a moment, but first I wanted to show a recreation that was done in 2012 and then another in 2020. One cool thing in an extremely sad case is that Parabon did one of their phenotyping snapshots for this case, and I think it's interesting for the fact that it looks so much like the recreation that was done on this Jane Doe, but they were arrived at through a completely different process. One is using genetic markers, and the other is using depth markers and clay. We know from solved cases, Parabon snapshots are often pretty close, especially if they were formulating it for the correct age of the person. Different factors such as the age estimate and the current health of the person, otherwise, they're pretty spot on. It's prediction based on percentages and genes. I always have to decide in these cases how much to say about who is to blame, and rather than bleep out the word for YouTube, I'm just going to say that this is tied to the Green River K case, which is one of the most well-known serial cases, and it went on for decades before the person responsible was found, and that was Gary Ridgway, of course. I'm not going to do a deep dive into this at all because it's already out there, but I've got some links in the description below if people are interested in that case. The young Doe here is believed to be one of the 2 yet to be identified women from that serial case. Ridgway has claimed to have taken the lives of 80 and has pled guilty so far to 48. Most of the cases took place in the 80s and 90s. The other still identified case is late 70s. Now, of course, Ridgway's credibility is really low, so whether or not he's truthful in this case matters too. But if he's truthful about this, it appears that the case happened in 1983. Isotope testing linked her place of origin to Alaska, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, or North Dakota. And it also suggested she could be from the Canadian provinces of British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Newfoundland, or Labrador, which I realize is a lot. The young women he preyed upon were mainly living on the streets, possible runaways, and struggling with substances or limited in the ways they had to make money, needing to survive, some of them with ages where they couldn't get jobs. It's just unfortunate that people target those who are most at risk and they hope won't be missed. If you know who she might be, please call the number on your screen. Jane Doe, B17, has gone unidentified for 39 years. Her peers would most likely be somewhere in their 50s today. The Lumberton Jane Doe, Lumberton, North Carolina. On July 2, 1978, a woman was discovered in North Carolina on the edge of a cornfield along Highway 74, approximately 1 mile east of Interstate 95 near Lumberton, North Carolina. She was wearing blue jeans with ragged cut-off hems, a white hooded short-sleeved shirt with horizontal stripes in multiple colors. The shoes shown here were worn by her. They're white wedge type with open toes in a size 6. She had light brown hair, or possibly a reddish brown. I was under the assumption hair doesn't change after someone passes. And so I did a little digging the other day because I couldn't understand why they would give so many different colors sometimes. But it turns out I was 100% wrong. The hair color can change based on the environment, if it's laying in soil or what is going on. So if you're researching to try to find a match for cases, like I do and I know probably other viewers do, the hair color isn't as set as it looks like it is. Probably in some of the times it is, but there is a changing factor to it. Apparently it depends on what undertones people have in their hair. For instance, mine has red and I have dark brown hair, but others might have yellow or red and yellow, and those undertones will come out differently. They estimate she was mid-teens to early 20s and she had just been there for a few weeks. This would place her date of birth around 1956 to 1963. She was probably 5'1" to 5'3" and weighed between 95 and 100 pounds. Her fingernails and toenails had matching red metallic nail polish. She had several fillings and she had 4 molars removed. It stated that these left some small gaps. I'm not sure if that means her wisdom teeth or other molars. I'm not the same age as this Doe, but I know 2 decades later, they pulled other molars if your teeth were crowded and they were readying a person for braces. If anyone recognizes her, please call the number given. The Lumberton Jane Doe has gone unidentified for 44 years. The Brunswick County Jane Doe, 1979. Leland, North Carolina. In 1979, hunters were out in a wooded area of North Carolina about 2,000 feet away from what is now known as Hooper Road, near the Hooper Hill section of Leland. It was there that a woman was discovered. It was believed that she'd been there for around 3 weeks before she was found. She had on a short-sleeved shirt, a tan sweater, black slacks or pajama pants, half stockings, red scuffed footies, and a gold Snoopy watch, in addition to the usual undergarments. They determined she was a black female and her age was early teens to 56 years old, which is incredibly wide, although they do seem to believe she was most likely on the older end of that estimation. This would place her date of birth from 1923 to 1966. She was around 5'4". A later examination that took place in 2017 changed the age estimate from 42 to 55, which would change the probable birth dates to 1924 to 1937. An isotope analysis was done and it determined that she was not native to North Carolina. In fact, it appears she hadn't been in North Carolina very long. She had most likely come from West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, or California. If anyone has any idea who she may be, please call the number on your screen. The Brunswick County Jane Doe has gone unidentified for 43 years. Pend Oriel County John Doe, Pend Oriel County, Washington. A man was found in December of 2014 in a remote wooded area of Washington state, inside of a tent. If they know what happened, it wasn't released, so it was likely natural. He had on a blue JanSport backpack, a red sleeping bag. He had some toothpaste, nail clippers, deodorant, just general items of self-care. He had a thick blue and red watch cap and aviator glasses. He wore a size 3XL, a plaid button-up faded glory t-shirt, and pants that were sized 48 by 30. He had on military-style boots with a steel toe in a size 8. They described his face as being asymmetrical, saying there were other signs of health abnormalities that may have caused discomfort, although it's not listed as exactly what that meant. Even his age isn't very clear. He is listed as age pre-70, which would mean he was born essentially in 1945 or sooner. It appears his hair color is also unknown. The Pend Oriel County John Doe has gone unidentified for 8 years. As always, thank you so much for watching. The current goal for the channel is 20,000 subscribers. Please consider subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss new episodes. Thank you so much to everybody commenting. Even with just an emoji, it really has made a big difference. Without it, there isn't a channel, so thank you guys so much. Take care of yourselves and each other.